Okay, picture this. In the Scottish Highlands, sitting like a little green jewel in the huge dark waters of Loch Maree, there's a tiny wooded island. It's almost always wrapped in mist, and you guessed it, soaked in legend. It feels like a place that's completely outside of time, and for thousands of years, it's been a sanctuary, a sanatorium, and a place of sacrifice.
So that's the big question, right? How did this happen? Well, we're going to dive right in. We're going to peel back all those layers of myth and history to try and understand the incredible pull of Isle Maree, an island where pagan gods and Christian saints literally share a graveyard, and where the line between a cure and a curse is just razor thin.
But you know, before we get to all the ghosts and the gods, we really need to understand the place itself. Because on Isle Maree, the land, the very trees that grow out of it, they tell the first chapter of its long, strange story.
So what's so special about it? Well, check this out. Loch Maree has more than 60 islands, and pretty much all of them are covered in Scots pine. But not this one. Nope. Isle Maree is home to these ancient oak and holly trees. And for anyone who knows their history, that is a massive clue, because oak and holly were the most sacred trees to the ancient Druids. And, well, what do you know, there's evidence of a stone circle here that dates back 2,000 years. This was never just another island. Right from the start, it was set apart as a sacred place.
But the Druids? They were just the beginning. Over the centuries, new ways of belief just kept washing over the island. But here's the thing. They never fully erased what came before. Instead, they all just kind of blended together, creating something totally new, something fascinating, and sometimes, honestly, a little disturbing.
This timeline really shows you what I mean. So you've got the Druids way back when. Then, in the 7th century, along comes St. Mawruba, an Irish missionary who builds a Christian chapel. Now, you'd think that would be the end of the pagan story, right? Wrong. 1,000 years later, in the 17th century, the official Church of Scotland is getting these frantic reports of bull sacrifices happening on that very same island. This wasn't one faith replacing another, it was a full-on fusion. And this right here is the heart of that fusion. You have the real historical guy, St. Mawruba, the Christian missionary, and then you have the folklore. Over time, his memory got all tangled up with a pre-Christian deity, creating this whole new figure people called God Mori. So you ended up with a saint being worshipped like a pagan god. People would be praying in his chapel one minute and then performing ancient, bloody rituals the next.
And the crazy part is, this wasn't happening in secret. The local people were openly sacrificing bulls on the island on St. Mawruba's official feast day. To them, there was no contradiction. It was just how you honored the powerful spirit of this place, the entity they called Mori. But for the official church, well, you can imagine, this was absolutely horrifying evidence of a pagan cult that just refused to die.
Now, this blend of Christian faith and pagan ritual gave birth to the island's most famous and most feared tradition. It got a reputation as a place that could cure insanity, but the methods they used, they were absolutely harrowing.
Let's just walk through this ritual, which, by the way, was practiced all the way up until the mid-1800s. Just imagine this. A person suffering from mental illness is tied to a rope and towed behind a boat. They'd circle the island 3 times, and after each lap, they'd be brutally dunked into the freezing dark water of the loch. After that 3rd plunge, they were dragged ashore to drink from a holy well and leave an offering. And this wasn't a one-time thing. It could be repeated for weeks, until the person was either deemed cured, or more likely just completely broken.
And you know, this was a big deal because the practice became a common saying in the area. If someone was acting a bit strange or irrational, people would joke, he must be wanting a dip in Loch Maree. It's a pretty dark piece of gallows humor, but it just goes to show how well known the island's reputation was all across the Highlands. But as the legend goes, the well's healing powers came to a sudden, violent end. The story is that a man, maybe out of desperation or maybe just to mock the tradition, tried to force the sacred cure on his sick dog. This act was seen as a huge desecration, and in response, the well's power didn't just fade away, it turned vengeful. They say both the man and his dog died shortly after, a final terrible curse from a well that once offered cures.
But the island wasn't just a place for these dark rituals and healings. It was also the stage for some incredible human drama. Its most famous legend is a just gut-wrenching story of love, jealousy, and a fatal misunderstanding.
Okay, so the story is set way back in the 9th century, a time when Viking longships were a common sight on these Scottish lochs. And it's about a Norwegian prince named Olaf, who fell completely in love with a local Highland princess named Isabel.
So, Prince Olaf had to go off to battle.
And to calm Princess Isabel's nerves, they came up with a simple plan. When his ship returned to Loch Maree, it would fly a white flag if he was alive and victorious. A black flag would mean he had died in battle. A pretty straightforward system, but one that held the seeds of their total destruction.
Well, weeks turned into months, and as the princess waited, her love started to curdle into doubt and jealousy. She got it in her head that he didn't care about her anymore, so when his ship finally appeared on the horizon flying that white flag of victory, she decided to put him through a fatal test. She ordered her own boat to be prepared with a black flag, and she lay down inside, pretending to be dead, just to see if his grief would prove his love.
When Prince Olaf saw that black flag, he was just destroyed by grief. He jumped into her boat, saw her lying there completely still, and in his despair, he plunged his dagger right into his own heart. The princess woke up to this absolute horror and, realizing what her terrible test had cost, she used the very same dagger on herself. They were buried together on Isle Maree, and 2 ancient stone slabs are said to mark their graves to this day.
All right, let's switch gears to a tradition with a slightly happier, though still kind of fateful outcome. A lot of people see the island's famous wishing tree and assume it's some ancient pagan custom, but actually, it's Victorian. The whole practice of hammering a coin into the oak tree for good luck was made famous by none other than Queen Victoria herself, after she visited back in 1877.
And this is where the story gets pretty ironic. The tree became so popular, so covered in coins and wishes, that it was eventually killed by copper poisoning. A symbol of hope was literally destroyed by the sheer weight of all that human desire. And even though the original tree is gone, you'll still see visitors today continuing the tradition on other trees nearby.
So what does all this incredible history mean for Isle Maree today? Well, the rituals are gone, the well is dry, but the island's power, that feeling of it being a place apart from the rest of the world, that remains. And now it's protected by a whole new kind of belief. This is the #1 rule of the island today, passed down through generations. The belief is that if you take anything, even a single pebble from the shore, you risk taking the island's old madness back into the world with you. The place that once drew people in to be cured now has a curse to make sure they don't take anything away. It's a really powerful taboo, and it's probably done a lot to preserve it.
So for anyone thinking of visiting, it is so important to understand that this is not a tourist trap. It's a protected nature reserve. The only way to get there is by water, like in a canoe or a kayak. Camping and fires are absolutely forbidden. The main rule is simple: leave no trace. You visit quietly, you visit respectfully, and you leave the island exactly as you found it.
And there's a really good reason for all these rules. These islands, and Isle Maree especially, are one of the last pristine pieces of the ancient Caledonian rainforest that used to cover almost all of Scotland. It's an incredibly precious and fragile ecosystem. So you see, the island's sacredness has evolved. It's not just about gods and saints anymore. It's also about preserving this irreplaceable piece of the natural world.
And so, we kind of end up where we began. For centuries, people were convinced the power of Isle Maree could change the human mind. Today, its power lies in its ability to remain unchanged by the human hand. Its sacredness is now all about conservation and respect. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Is the island's true power something supernatural, or is it just found in the deep, quiet, and incredible resilience of nature itself?